Hi everyone, I'm Geraldine Cambron. I'm the course co-instructor. Today I'm going to talk about epidemiology and give you an overview of what it is. For this course we will use the textbook called Epidemiology by Dr. Leon Gordis. You can access either the 4th or the 5th edition. The 5th edition has an additional student consult, which is beneficial to you as a student, but both texts are very, very similar. So let's look at the definition of epidemiology. I actually have two different definitions on this slide. The first is, epidemiology is the study of how disease is distributed in populations and the factors that influence or determine this distribution. So really we're looking at epidemiology as the study of disease. There's so many different factors to epidemiology. And so really the second definition is more complete in the idea of what really is epidemiology. And so the second definition says, epidemiology is the study of the distribution and determinants of health-related states or events in specified populations and the application of this study to control of health problems. And so really it's looking at how do people get disease, what are different factors that might be risk factors, how does disease spread from one person to the other and throughout different populations, and what is the natural course of that disease or the prognosis of that disease. So there's many different facets that tie into epidemiology. Let's look at a few of those right now. The first objective of epidemiology is to identify the cause of disease and the relevant risk factors. And so really trying to understand why do some people get sick and other people don't. We can identify risk factors in two different categories, controllable and uncontrollable risk factors. The uncontrollable risk factors are ones that we really, obviously based on the name, we have no control over. Things such as gender, or race, or age, family history, genetics, that we can't change these things. But there are lots of different controllable risk factors out there in the world. Things such as smoking or obesity, exercise levels, alcohol levels, different types of food intake. So there's many different controllable factors that we can look at. When we're looking to try and determine what is causing a disease, we look at both controllable and uncontrollable factors. This is my favorite comic that deals with epidemiology. And what this is there's three different spinny wheels. The first is a list of different types of potential risk factors, such as stress and red wine, smoking, exercise, things like that. And then it says can cause. Then we have a whole bunch of different diseases or disorders, hypothermia, depression, glaucoma, and then several different populations, children, rats, men 25 to 40. And it feels like when we watch the news that this is what it's like. We hear things such as eggs are good for you, eggs are bad for you, butter's good for you, butter's bad for you, exercise is good, but not too much exercise. It gets very frustrating and confusing, and sometimes it's dependent on what disease we're looking at, and it's also dependent on which population we're talking about. And so when I first saw this many years ago, I thought, oh, this is exactly it. This is it. So I had to share that with you today. The second objective of epidemiology is to determine the extent of disease found in the community. For example, you can see in this slide, this is the second objective of epidemiology is to determine the extent of disease found in the community. What we see here, the first graph is looking at the amount of disease that is found in the United States over several years. And we'll notice that it's climbing. And so what we can say from that graph is that the amount of Lyme has increased over the years. And we can kind of see peaks and valleys, but overall, the slope of it is headed in the same direction. The second chart shows us where the Lyme disease is found, and that's only in 2011. And so we can see the extent of how far it's spread. It's very popular to see Lyme disease in the eastern states as well as in Wisconsin and Minnesota, probably because those are very wooded areas that have many ticks. And so what we can tell from this is the extent of disease and in which states it's most frequently found. The third objective of epidemiology is to study the natural history and prognosis of disease. When we talk about Parkinson's disease, I can't help but think of Michael J. Fox. And so I put a picture of him here, but that's not really what this chart was about. They didn't study him in order to create these dots on the chart. In this chart, though, this was a large-scale study looking at what happens from the time of diagnosis to 10 years later in 4 different factors of a person's life. And so what we see here is that about 20% of the population initially is working, and that decreases to 0% of the population of people who have Parkinson's within 5 years, and then it stays to 0% at 0% by 10 years. But the top line that we see, the dotted line, is the ability to walk unaided. So when people are first diagnosed with Parkinson's, the majority of them can walk unaided. After 1 year, it drops slightly. After 5 years, we see it drops down to almost 80%. And within 10 years, only about 30 or 40% of people can walk unaided when after they have been diagnosed with Parkinson's. The 2 lines in the middle deal with dwelling independently and the ability to drive. And we'll notice that between 1 year and 5 years, there's a significant drop. And so this is really looking at what happens when a person is first diagnosed and we follow them forward over time. How does their life change? The fourth objective of epidemiology is to evaluate both existing and newly developed preventive and therapeutic measures and modes of healthcare delivery. So what we see here are many different diets that might help in terms of preventing obesity as well as treat obesity. I don't know about you, but I've tried several of these. And so really, trying to determine which of these different types of treatments are most beneficial for preventing as well as treating obesity becomes very important, especially later in life. So in epidemiology, not only are we looking at what causes disease, but also how can we help treat it or how can we help prevent it. The fifth and final objective of epidemiology is to provide the foundation for developing public policy relating to environmental problems, genetic issues, and other considerations regarding disease prevention and health promotion. There are so many different types of policies that focus on public health, and there's lots of different factors that affect these policies. Quite a bit of policy development occurs through public health organizations such as the CDC, APHA, and the World Health Organization. I've included links on the website so that you can check out these different websites, but these organizations also do many different studies. And so they look at what are some of the determinants of disease, what are some of the ways to prevent disease, and what are some ways to take care of treating different disorders. And so I encourage you to look around these organizations' websites and see what they're all about. In this class, we'll talk about both epidemiology and biostatistics. They really do tie together. We really can't have one without the other. And so in this class, we will be talking about both. So when we talk about one study design, we'll talk about what statistic we typically use with that study design. Then we'll go on to a different study design and again talk about what statistics. So we'll be going through many different aspects of epidemiology and discussing how do we utilize statistics in those different facets. So if you have any questions, we're here to help you. Happy studying. You guys got this. This should be a fun semester. I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.